Imagine for a moment how many women spend years waiting for a single sign to realize that menopause is approaching. Most believe it all begins with the famous hot flashes. After all, this is the most talked about symptom, the most remembered, and perhaps for that reason, the most anticipated. But what if I told you that for many women, the body begins to send signals long before that? Subtle, silent signals, so easy to ignore that they end up being confused with stress, overwork, natural aging, or simply a difficult phase of life. Perhaps you yourself have experienced this situation. You sleep practically the same number of hours as before, but wake up feeling that the rest wasn't enough. Throughout the day, you notice that you are more tired than you used to be. Small memory lapses begin to appear. Finding a word during a conversation seems to require more effort. Concentration decreases, and patience seems to disappear for reasons that didn't bother you before. All this happens while your routine checkups remain normal. Then the question arises, is it just the passing of years, or is there something more going on? Before we continue this investigation, I want to extend an invitation. If you value reliable information, explained simply and always based on the best scientific evidence about menopause, women's health, healthy aging, and quality of life, please subscribe to the channel. Our goal is precisely to transform medical knowledge into practical guidance that helps you better understand your own body and make more informed decisions alongside your healthcare professional. The most interesting thing is that this story doesn't begin with menopause itself. It begins years earlier, during a phase called perimenopause. According to information widely disseminated by the North American Menopause Society, the National Institutes of Health, the Mayo Clinic, and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, this transition can last several years before the last menstruation. During this period, the ovaries begin to produce estrogen and progesterone in an increasingly unpredictable way. On some days, these hormones remain relatively stable. On others, they undergo significant fluctuations. It is precisely this instability that makes many women feel that something has changed, even without being able to identify exactly what. There's a fascinating detail that few people know. Although we think of estrogen only as a hormone related to the menstrual cycle, it participates in the functioning of practically the entire organism. We can imagine it as a conductor leading a large orchestra. As long as it maintains the proper rhythm, different body systems work in harmony. When this conductor begins to fail or appears irregularly, each instrument starts to respond differently. That's why seemingly unrelated changes can occur simultaneously. The brain is often one of the first organs to notice these changes. This happens because several brain regions have receptors that are extremely sensitive to estrogen. These include areas responsible for sleep, memory, mood, concentration, body temperature regulation, and even the control of energy metabolism. Even before classic symptoms appear, the brain is already trying to adapt to the new hormonal fluctuations. This is precisely where many women begin to misinterpret the signs. The routine remains similar, but the energy levels are no longer the same. That energy that once allowed them to work, take care of their family, exercise, and still end the day feeling energetic begins to slowly disappear. Because this change happens gradually, it is often attributed to the accumulation of responsibilities or simply to age. But there is one detail that particularly catches the attention of experts. In many women, the first symptom doesn't appear during the day. It happens at night. Interestingly, many people believe they sleep well simply because they stay in bed for 7 or 8 hours. However, quantity of sleep does not necessarily mean quality. During perimenopause, one of the first consequences of estrogen fluctuations is precisely the fragmentation of sleep. A person may fall asleep normally, but then wake up several times without realizing it, spend more time in superficial stages of sleep, or lose part of the so-called deep sleep, the one responsible for physical and mental recovery. The following morning, there's a feeling that the rest didn't really happen. This change is usually extremely subtle. Many women don't even realize they've started sleeping worse. They only notice that they wake up tired, depend on more coffee to function during the day, or find it difficult to maintain the same level of productivity as a few years ago. As the weeks or months go by, Other changes begin to emerge like pieces of a puzzle. Memory seems less efficient. Concentration decreases during simple tasks. Mood swings more easily. Small problems begin to generate disproportionate irritation. Some women describe the feeling as if a mental fog has taken over their thoughts. The curious thing is that all these symptoms may have the same origin. Estrogen plays a role in communication between billions of neurons. It influences substances important for brain function, helps form connections between nerve cells, and contributes to maintaining regions responsible for attention, learning, and memory functioning efficiently. When its levels begin to fluctuate, the brain needs to continuously reorganize this communication. This process requires adaptation, and during this phase, symptoms such as difficulty concentrating, memory lapses, and mental fatigue become much more common than most people imagine. At the same time, another change begins to occur almost imperceptibly. As sleep ceases to be truly restorative, the body begins to produce larger amounts of cortisol, popularly known as the stress hormone. Under normal conditions, cortisol is essential for our survival. The problem arises when its levels remain elevated for long periods due to insufficient rest and constant stress. It is at this point that different systems of the body begin to respond less efficiently, preparing the ground for changes that many women will only notice months later. This persistent increase in cortisol doesn't happen in isolation. The human body functions as an integrated system where one change influences several others. When sleep quality deteriorates for weeks or months, the brain begins to interpret this situation as a constant state of alert. Even if you don't feel particularly stressed, the body may act as if it needs to remain prepared to face a challenge at any moment. That's precisely why many women say something very similar during the consultation. Doctor, I haven't changed my diet. I'm still doing practically the same things, but my body seems completely different. And this perception has a scientific basis. Research published by the National Institutes of Health, the Mayo Clinic, and Harvard Medical School shows that the progressive decline in estrogen associated with worsening sleep quality alters the way the body uses and stores energy. To understand this, imagine metabolism as a car engine. For many years, this engine has functioned in a certain way, consuming fuel at a relatively constant rate. However, when significant hormonal changes occur, this engine begins to work differently. Estrogen has a direct influence on glucose and fat metabolism and even on the preservation of muscle mass. When its levels begin to fluctuate, the body tends to expend less energy at rest. At the same time, it becomes easier to accumulate fat, especially in the abdominal region. It is precisely at this moment that one of the greatest frustrations of perimenopause arises. The scale starts to go up even when the diet remains practically the same. This leads many women to believe they have completely lost control of their own bodies. Some even think they did something wrong or that they simply lost discipline. In reality, what is happening is much more complex. Another hormone enters the picture, insulin. Insulin acts like a key that allows glucose to enter cells to be used as an energy source. Under ideal conditions, this mechanism works efficiently. However, poor sleep, increased cortisol, reduced estrogen, and less physical activity can decrease the sensitivity of cells to the action of insulin. This phenomenon is known as insulin resistance. When this happens, the body needs to produce larger amounts of insulin to achieve the same result. Over time, elevated levels of this hormone further promote fat storage, especially around the waist. Perhaps now some situations will begin to make sense. You continue wearing practically the same clothes, but you notice that your pants are too tight in the abdominal area. Or you might notice that you've lost muscle definition even without significant changes in weight. These changes are not just cosmetic. Body composition really starts to change. While fat tends to increase, muscle mass undergoes a gradual reduction, a process known as age-related sarcopenia, which can be accelerated by hormonal changes during menopause. And here's an extremely important detail. Muscle is not just for generating force or facilitating movement. It is one of the tissues that consumes the most energy daily. The greater the amount of preserved muscle mass, the higher the body's energy expenditure tends to be, even during rest. When this mass decreases, the metabolism naturally starts to consume fewer calories. Notice how all these pieces begin to fit together. Fluctuations in estrogen levels worsen sleep quality. Inadequate sleep increases cortisol levels. Cortisol promotes metabolic changes. Insulin resistance becomes more likely. Muscle mass gradually decreases. Metabolism reduces your energy expenditure. Abdominal fat begins to accumulate more easily. It's not a single factor. It is a sequence of biological events that happen slowly, almost silently, over several years. Another aspect that is often overlooked involves inflammation. When we hear this word, we usually think of intense pain or infections. However, there is a type of mild inflammation called low-grade chronic inflammation, which can increase during menopause. This silent inflammation is associated with excess abdominal fat, inadequate sleep, a sedentary lifestyle, and hormonal changes. It doesn't produce obvious symptoms in the beginning, but it influences several important bodily processes, including metabolism, cardiovascular health, and even brain function. That's why so many women report experiencing a gradual decrease in physical energy. It doesn't mean a lack of willpower. Most of the time, there is a biological explanation behind this change. Another interesting point is that estrogen also plays a role in the health of blood vessels. For many years, it helps maintain a certain level of cardiovascular protection, promoting arterial elasticity and contributing to the balance of various mechanisms related to circulation. With its progressive reduction, it becomes even more important to control factors such as blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, regular physical activity, and body weight. This is one of the reasons why experts emphasize medical monitoring so much during this phase of life. The sooner these changes are understood, the greater the opportunities to act before small imbalances turn into bigger problems. It is precisely in this quarantamise that many women realize that there is no single solution. Science shows that a balanced diet, strength training, quality sleep, stress management, and professional guidance remain the fundamental pillars for navigating this phase in better health. In addition to these strategies recommended by healthcare professionals, some women also choose to use the supplement mentioned in the description of this video as a complementary support for metabolism, weight control, and well-being during menopause. It is important to remember that supplements do not replace a balanced diet, exercise, or medical supervision, but they can be part of an individualized strategy when properly guided. Once these metabolic changes begin to be understood, an even more intriguing question arises. If so many changes are happening at the same time, why do some women suffer intensely while others go through this phase with much milder symptoms? The answer involves genetics, lifestyle, sleep quality, body composition, diet, exercise, smoking, stress levels, and even individual differences in how the brain responds to hormonal fluctuations. It is precisely this combination that explains why each experience with menopause is unique. And there's another important discovery that few people know about. The brain continues to be one of the protagonists in this whole story, influencing not only sleep and memory, but also the appearance of the famous hot flashes that so many women associate with the onset of menopause. It is precisely at this point that we arrive at the most well-known symptom of menopause, hot flashes. Interestingly, for many women, they appear when the hormonal transition process has already been underway for quite some time. In other words, what is usually seen as the beginning of menopause often represents only the phase in which hormonal changes have become more evident. To understand why this happens, we need to talk about a small region of the brain called the hypothalamus. Despite its small size, it plays a fundamental role in regulating body temperature, sleep, hunger, thirst, and the production of various hormones. During reproductive life, estrogen helps the hypothalamus correctly interpret small variations in body temperature. When levels of this hormone begin to fluctuate and subsequently remain low, this system becomes much more sensitive. Imagine a thermostat that has always worked perfectly, but suddenly interprets a small temperature increase as a significant overheating. The response is immediate. The brain activates mechanisms to cool the body, dilating blood vessels in the skin and stimulating perspiration. This is exactly what happens during a heat wave. This explanation helps to understand why many women feel intensely hot even when in a pleasant environment, while others experience night sweats that can interrupt their sleep several times. And here we see a cycle that can feed on itself. Hormonal changes impair sleep quality. Poor sleep increases cortisol. Cortisol interferes with metabolism, promotes mild inflammatory processes, and reduces physical energy. With less energy, many women decrease their physical activity, accelerating muscle loss. At the same time, metabolism becomes less efficient and abdominal fat tends to increase. Fortunately, understanding this cycle also means that it's possible to break it. One of the most well-documented strategies in science is strength training. Many people still associate weight training only with muscle gain, but during perimenopause and menopause, preserving muscle mass is one of the most important measures to maintain an active metabolism, improve insulin sensitivity, protect bones, and promote physical independence over the years. Another essential point is nutrition. Adequate protein intake provides the necessary amino acids to preserve muscle mass, while fiber-rich foods help control blood sugar, promote gut health, and contribute to greater satiety. Fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and healthy fats also offer important nutrients to reduce cardiovascular risk factors and support the proper functioning of the body. Sleep remains another key factor. Establishing a regular sleep routine, reducing exposure to bright light before bed, avoiding excessive caffeine in the afternoon, and treating sleep disorders when present are evidence-supported strategies that can significantly improve physical and mental recovery. Stress management also deserves attention. We know that it's not always possible to eliminate worries from daily life, but activities such as walking, regular physical exercise, relaxation techniques, meditation, leisure time, and strengthening social relationships can help reduce persistent cortisol levels. At the same time, medical follow-up becomes even more important. Each woman experiences this phase differently. Some have mild symptoms, others experience changes that significantly compromise their quality of life. Depending on the clinical history, the intensity of the symptoms, and individual risk factors, there are different therapeutic strategies that can be discussed with a healthcare professional. Beyond metabolic health, it's important to remember that estrogen influences bone health. With its sustained reduction, bone mass loss tends to accelerate, increasing the risk of osteopenia and osteoporosis over the years. Similarly, the cardiovascular protection conferred during reproductive life gradually diminishes, reinforcing the importance of controlling blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, and maintaining healthy lifestyle habits. Another very common question is whether all symptoms disappear after menopause. The answer is, it depends. For many women, hot flashes and night sweats gradually decrease with age. However, some consequences of sustained estrogen reduction may remain, influencing body composition, muscle mass, bone health, vaginal lubrication, insulin sensitivity, cardiovascular health, and in some cases, aspects of memory and concentration. This is precisely why recognizing the changes of perimenopause early makes such a difference. The sooner these changes are understood, the greater the opportunities to protect long-term health. Therefore, the first link in the description indicates a supplement developed to support women during this phase of life, assisting with metabolism, weight control, and overall well-being during menopause and post-menopause. Some women choose to include it as a complementary strategy within a broader care plan, always considering the guidance of a healthcare professional. It is important to emphasize that it does not replace healthy habits or medical treatments when indicated. Now we can answer the question that prompted this entire conversation. For many women, the first sign of menopause isn't actually hot flashes. Often the body begins to show that something is changing through subtle alterations in sleep quality. Even before the last menstruation, estrogen fluctuations can affect brain regions responsible for sleep, memory, concentration, mood, body temperature regulation, and metabolism. As a result, persistent fatigue, a feeling of non-restorative sleep, difficulty concentrating, minor memory lapses, a gradual reduction in energy, and emotional changes that are often attributed solely to stress or aging may occur. Over time, these hormonal changes also favor changes in body composition, reduction in muscle mass, increased insulin resistance, redistribution of abdominal fat, and a higher risk of cardiovascular and bone changes, especially when preventive strategies are not adopted. The good news is that menopause doesn't have to be seen as the inevitable start of declining health. It represents a new phase of life, marked by natural biological changes, but also by numerous opportunities for self-care. The best scientific evidence shows that a balanced diet, adequate protein intake, strength training, regular physical activity, quality sleep, stress management, preservation of muscle mass, periodic medical checkups, and appropriate nutritional support can significantly contribute to improving metabolism, protecting bones, reducing cardiovascular risk factors, and promoting greater energy, autonomy, and quality of life. Knowledge is one of the most powerful tools for taking care of your own health. The sooner you recognize the signals your body sends, the greater the chances of getting through this phase with peace of mind, confidence, and well-being. If this content helped you better understand what really happens during perimenopause and menopause, subscribe to the channel and follow our upcoming videos. Every week, we bring you reliable, up-to-date information based on scientific evidence so you can take care of your health more confidently, make informed choices, and live each stage of life with greater quality. After all, understanding your body is the first step to taking care of it in the best possible way.